All right, ladies and gentlemen, of course, earlier today, the announcement coming down from a New York City grand jury in the case of Eric Gardner, who died in police custody while they were arresting him. It was so-called chokehold case. No indictment from the grand jury. Now, of course, joining us right now is Michael Meyers. He's President and Executive Director of the New York Civil Rights Coalition. We have a lot to talk about, Michael. Let's start with this breaking news of the day. Today, everybody knew the grand jury was meeting. They might have had a decision, and the networks were speculating, and we have the video. Here again, well, your reaction to the no indictment. Are you surprised?
No.
Why not?
Well, if there was going to be an indictment, you got to remember, you got to have what the grand jury does. The grand jury sees if there's probable cause to believe a crime has been committed, and if a crime has committed, that the person who was before the subject of the arrest, the cop, whether or not that cop committed.
And he testified for 2 hours.
And there has to be a grand jury that believes that a crime was committed. And according to the people that I've talked to, there is no state law against a chokehold. There's the NYPD policy against the chokehold, but there's no state law against the chokehold. And then the question becomes whether there's reasonable force used by the police officer to subdue him and to arrest him. That becomes the issue for the grand jury. Now, the question for us is, and there was a videotape, which is the difference between New York City or Staten Island and Ferguson. There was a videotape, and people saw a man screaming and telling them they couldn't breathe. And that, and the son of Eric Gardner said, all you got to do is look at the videotape. But that's not what the grand jury does. It just doesn't look at a videotape.
No.
It puts everything in, and get the evidence. The only problem I have with the grand jury process here, and because I believe in grand juries, I also believe in the rule of law. The issue here, because the DA in Staten Island is always regarded as a person who works very closely with police officers. And that's what DAs do. They work with police officers. They might have done what Governor Mario Cuomo did. Now we have Governor Andrew Cuomo. What Mario Cuomo did was, this was the issue of police misuse of force, or abuse of force, in terms of Crown Heights and Queens, and when we had racial tensions in New York City, he appointed a special prosecutor, knowing that the local DAs, it was the Michael Griffith's case and stuff in Howard Beach, knowing that local DAs are too close to the cops. I think it should have been a special prosecutor, and I think people would have accepted it. No indictment or an indictment. But when you don't have a special prosecutor and you have a DA who is so close to the cops, who work every day with cops, then you have suspicion.
But does the video in this case make it better or worse for the so-called protesters and the Al Sharptons of the world? In other words, or for anybody to accept it? Because what you do have is you have the guy saying, "I can't breathe," but you know that the grand jury saw this. So the grand jury saw this and still, in consideration of all the facts, said, no, the cop didn't do anything wrong. Now, they also saw the other part of the tape where they approach him. They had suspicion he was selling cigarettes illegally, and he said, "You're not touching me. No, get away from me. You're not arresting me." Again, resisting arrest. That's probably what the officer testified to the grand jury. I was trying to do my job. He wouldn't let me. We had to take him down. He's like 360 pounds.
There's one thing that they won't have to say in this specific situation. There won't be no hands up, don't shoot. Because Eric Gardner did not put his hands up. He did not submit. And so you don't have that. But you'll have the mantra from the racial rhetoric.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
I can't breathe.
But at that point, he was already, down, and they got 5 guys on top of him, and they didn't know he had illness. They didn't know he had asthma. All that kind of stuff.
What I'm telling you is that I want to channel Barbara Jordan, Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, and she said, "My faith in the Constitution is whole, is total, is complete. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in the rule of law. I believe in due process of law, and cops get due process of law too." And cops are entitled to the rule of law, not the mob, not pressure groups demanding indictments, demanding convictions. That's not the way our system works. Now, if there's been constitutional violations or civil rights violations, then the federal government might take another look.
What do you think that there's going to be anything like Ferguson here in New York in a reaction?
I never predict violence. I never predict mob rule. And I don't think St. Louis is like the Jim Crow South, and I don't think New York City is the Jim Crow South.
All right, Michael Meyers, ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot more to talk about with him when we come back, so don't go away. We have Ferguson to discuss here on the Steve Malzberg Show.
The Ferguson grand jury's decision not to indict former Officer Darren Wilson was yet another slap in our face. It was a painful reminder that just like with Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice and so many others, that law enforcement officers kill our black and brown men and boys without repercussions.
All right, folks, before we get back to Michael Meyers here, I want to tell you about a great new book. It's by Newsmax contributor and political analyst Dick Morris. It's called Power Grab: Obama's Dangerous Plan for a One-Party Nation. I strongly urge you to get a copy of this #1 Amazon bestseller. Go to powergrab411.com to get your copy now, powergrab411.com. And rejoining us is Michael Meyers, President and Executive Director of the New York Civil Rights Coalition. And all right, we finished talking about the Staten Island case. Let's talk about Ferguson and go backwards. You were chuckling during the Congresswoman's little speech on the floor of the House there.
The members of the Congressional Black Chorus, as I call them, they are so bad. They are such embarrassment. They ought to know better than this racial rhetoric, but they are in love with their own voice and racial hysteria. And what they do is they feed and fan the flames of racial division. And they ought to be more responsible. You had even Congressman John Lewis, who was an icon in the civil rights history, who I believe is problem with John Lewis is his memory and his reputation is really based in the past. This is no longer the Jim Crow South. But he said before the St. Louis grand jury came out with their decision, he said if they don't indict the cop, there's going to be mass nonviolent demonstrations across the country. And he wanted mass nonviolent demonstrations. He forgot the presumption of innocence. He forgot the rule of law. He forgot due process of law.
But he also called this Emmett Till. Jesse Jackson has called this, and Trayvon Martin, Emmett Till. I mean, Emmett Till was a young boy in his bed. The racists pulled him out of his bed in the middle of the night, gave him a horrific death, dumped his body in barbed wire in the river. How is this Emmett Till? The guy beat up a cop.
And beat him to a pulp. And the Emmett Till situation were not police officers.
Right.
Trayvon Martin situation were not police officers.
No, but not even that,
These people are lunatics. What can I tell you?
That's what I've been saying for 2 weeks.
And
lunatics.
They identify with racial rhetoric and with racial militants and hustlers like Al Sharpton. And that's why I'm telling you, nobody should be surprised by President Barack Obama's identification with Al Sharpton. He was the one with Jeremiah Wright for 20 years. And he claimed on his campaign
he was never there for those inflammatory
he was there.
sermons.
He was there like he was there at college. Look, the man knows better than this, but he doesn't have the moral courage to speak truth to power, as they say.
All right, what about Eric Holder? What damage, in your view, has he done with this Ferguson case to the country?
Well, Eric Holder has turned the Justice Department into a Justice Department of double standards. He identifies with the racial militants. They do not want to speak back to the racial militants and the racial hustlers. They invite the racial hustler. Eric Holder, Barack Obama, they are twin sisters. They're twin sisters. They believe in this racial rhetoric. And again, Obama campaigned on this. We don't have a black nation. There's no black in the United States. There's no white America. There's only the United States of America. Now, everything goes back to black. I mean, if he had a son, he'd look like Trayvon Martin.
Yeah, what did that isn't that a racist statement?
Of course it's a racist statement.
Every black kid would look like Barack Obama? They all look the same?
It's not only racist, it's pathetic.
It's absurd, yeah.
It's absurd. But now you have it. And then you have the same thing with respect to this situation, because Barack Obama and Eric Holder, they run down there.
Well, he hasn't gone down there
yet.
No,
I don't mean run down to Ferguson.
Oh, okay.
They run down there with the militants everywhere. They call them to the White House. Let's have a session. Let's have a discussion about race on our terms.
My favorite on the networks is Van Jones, who a former Obamaite, who was all over CNN during the riots, and he kept calling them over and over for days, the rioters, the looters, the burners, a couple of knuckleheads. Knuckleheads. Great seeing you, sir. Thank you. All right, Michael Meyers, ladies and gentlemen. Up next, Give Me 5. It's all straight ahead right here on the Steve Malzberg Show.